First off, I burnt out hard. As you start to talk about it, everybody else seems to be too. Everybody else seems to be burnt out. Everybody else seems to be exhausted. We've all gone to bed before and you're thinking like, I just need a good night's sleep. You wake up and you're like, that's it, right? There's got to be more. I'm more tired than when I went to bed.
Welcome to Becoming Radical, the podcast for creators, builders, and dreamers just like you. What does it mean to become radical in a world of constant change? Hosted by Michael Gaizutis, each week we'll explore the real-time journeys of those rewriting the rules. From untold failures to groundbreaking success. If you're ready to break the boundaries of limited thinking, this is your guide to unlimited growth.
Welcome to Becoming Radical. I am here today with Stephen Langer. Stephen, it's great to have you here. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate the opportunity. It'll be a fun dialogue.
Absolutely. I know we've been talking for a little while and really excited to have you on our show. We learned a little bit about you and it really intrigued us and got us excited because you are the founder and CEO of Well by Design. From what I understand, you guys are really dedicated to enhancing workplace wellness, which is a huge thing these days. And I think more importantly, into the future will become an even bigger thing. I always love to hear more about what leads you to an inspiration point to do something. So one of the first questions I have for you today is what really inspired you to establish Well by Design, and how did your previous experience really influence the creation of Well by Design as a company?
Thanks. I appreciate that. Honestly, it was firsthand experience. And it's funny how sometimes everything in your life that you've been doing that you didn't realize was all coming together for a reason does. I think we've all worked in a healthy workplace culture. We've all worked in a toxic workplace culture. Personally, I've had the ability to see firsthand as a leader what happens when you come in with a healthy culture and you focus on building relationships and developing those pieces out, and you see how it actually helps to influence a workspace in a positive way. I've also seen what happens when you don't have that ability and when you can't actually impact those spaces. So for myself, I worked heavily in the education sector, did the Masters of Leadership, did all the things, right? The executive HR management courses and all of that. But I reached a point where I was like, you know what? First off, I burnt out hard. I'll happily tell you my story later about that. But also, as you start to talk about it, everybody else seems to be too. Everybody else seems to be burnt out. Everybody else seems to be exhausted. You've all gone to bed before and you're thinking like, I just need a good night's sleep. You wake up and you're like, that's it. Right? There's got to be more. I'm more tired than when I went to bed.
Yeah.
What we're doing isn't working. We need to find a different way. Yeah. And so I've always had that mentality that if I'm going to say we need to do something different, I'm going to prove it.
Yeah.
Company, the opportunity to get in and actually show people how to live with intention and live by design, and we can get ourselves out of that rat race.
Amazing. Live by design, well by design. It all works so well together, and you're right. Everybody is burnt out. It's hard to live in today's modern day world. You have kids, you have responsibilities. This is without any additional barriers to entry, be it chronic illness. If you're talking about wellness, if in chronic illness, acute illness, and then the synergies between the workplace. That's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But how do you define organizational wellness? And why do you think it's crucial more than ever for companies today to have organizational wellness?
I mean, that's a deep question. That goes a long way. You mentioned something too about the wellness and the complexity that everybody's dealing with. A lot of people are also doing it alone in the sense that they don't have a partner that they're doing things with. And so the standard wellness things of just take a night for yourself, it doesn't actually work because they're a solo parent and they've got kids and they've got all the things. And so it is so critical to find the tailored things that work for each individual to help with that.
Yeah.
So how do you talk about wellness in the workplace? To me, everybody talks about camaraderie, the idea of like, we have a break room with games and snacks and all the things. But what is it like to be in that space? Do people first feel safe? Do they feel valued? Do they feel heard? But also, do they feel like they belong? Do they feel like they're connected? And Are you actually in the trenches with each other? Are you actually in there doing the good work? And so a lot of times companies
Yeah.
try to do things like nobody wants to come into work and cause problems, right? I've never heard that.
Mm.
I've never heard anybody say like, I'm going to go in and I'm going to piss a few people off today. And, if I can be late on a project, it's been a good day.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
want to do a good job. If they can't, it's because something's in their way. My
Yeah.
job is really about trying to turn over the rock and identify those things.
Mm.
I'm not about a Christmas wish list. I'm not about your standard benefits plans and those things. Those are all great.
Yeah.
But what is it that's in your way on a day-to-day situation that can help clear the way for you to be working at an optimal level? And I'm
Interesting.
super intentional with optimal, right? Because
Yeah.
a lot of times, like, we got to get more efficiency, we got to get to peak performance. Okay,
Mm.
you can get there for a period of time, but where's optimal, where everybody's healthy, where everybody's doing good work, and where it's sustainable
Yeah.
moving forward?
Yeah. So interesting because, you touched on some things like, unlimited PTO and all these perks and all these benefits that you see everywhere. I don't even know what that means, unlimited PTO, but they try and define it as you can take as much time as you want off. Now, is that real? Is that true? Who knows? It's a good question. Time will tell as you try and put it into effect. But I think it goes so much deeper than that. It's all about, as you said, being in the trenches with your team. There's no I in team. If you think about great sports, we were talking about hockey earlier, right? You think about great sports teams, whether they're amateur, with kids playing, to professional level sports. It doesn't matter if it's hockey or football or basketball or tennis. It's indifferent, right? I think what really matters is that we're working together as a unit. And if you think about some of the best leaders, as we both know, globally, well respected, building great organizations, I think the best leaders have great teams that they trust. Also, teams that support each other, teams that have fun, teams that feel like they're winning in different aspects, not just in terms of revenue and profit margins and growth, but holistically winning. They love to come to work. That's rare these days. And
Yeah.
it's hard to find. And even if you maintain a small, intimate workplace, 5 people, 10 people, it's still difficult. It gets easier, I think, as you have less people and harder as you have larger amounts of people, employees, contractors, and so on. So I guess that brings me to another question is, what are some of the common challenges that some of these organizations face when they try to implement these wellness programs, whether they're small to large? What do you see as a big challenge today, and how do you work to overcome them with them?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on each individual organization. And you mentioned it, like we want all the things.
Yeah.
We want the fun, we want the camaraderie, we
Mm,
want the connection, the trenches, and all those things. What does that actually look like? And
yeah.
that's where it's unique to each organization. So it's not as simple as just take this plan and implement it.
Hmm.
Um, you need to really dive in and get a sense of understanding. So
Yeah.
here's a really simple one. I'll give you two. Here's a really simple one where I was working with a company, and the CEO was so proud of the fact that they don't start till 8:30, so none of the meetings start till 8:30.
Mm.
I'm respecting my staff. When I surveyed the staff and talked to the staff, you know what they said was the most frustrating thing? This meeting started at 8:30 because
Mm.
now the workday doesn't start at 8:30. I got to be there at 8 so that I
Yeah.
can make sure I drink coffee, check my emails, get my materials ready, say hello to people, and be ready for the meeting at 8:30.
Yeah.
Now I got to
Yeah.
get my kids to daycare earlier, and it just, it
Yeah.
snowballs, right? And so a simple thing like that, where the leader thinks they're trying to do well for their
Mm.
team, is frustrating their team. When you can uncover that
Interesting.
nugget, you can move your team forward, right? Nobody was trying to
Interesting.
cause a problem. It just
Yeah.
did. Here's another one for you. A lot of companies are billable, non-billable. And so the leader's like, I got to have the more billable hours and I don't want my staff working non-billable. Yes, I care
Mm.
about them. Yes, I want them to do well. But when they're not working, it's non-billable. And
Yeah.
so I need to get them billing. And my response is, you need to change the language.
Yeah.
Instead of it being called non-billable, you call it billable and renewable,
Mm.
right? And so it's not that they're not doing anything. It's not that it's non-billable time. This is the renewable time where they're getting ready for the next client, where they're doing the research to make sure that they
Mm.
have the ultimate knowledge, where they're working to promote your team, where they're connecting with colleagues where they have to.
Mm.
It's important work, but we can't just click, 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 click from bill to bill
Mm.
to bill to bill. We have to be able to renew and change our focus. And so just a
It's
simple shift like that,
fascinating.
right? Simple things like that.
It's fascinating. It's a framing issue in some cases and a reframing issue, it sounds like. Because what we've been doing, what we've been conditioned to do and what many follow instead of leading by design, as we talked about, they're following the status quo of what's been established as a benchmark. So if X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z has done X, Y, and Z, then we're going to continue to do that. Here at Becoming Radical, and everything we do and everyone we talk to, it's all about changing and challenging the market for a
Yeah.
better or different reason or both, right? So if we think about Sir Johnny Ives, from previous chief design officer from Apple, that was his intention with everything. How do we make it different, better, or both, right? And I think that's so important because at the end of the day, when we can create that level of impact and resonance, that allows us to foster true growth. So it has to be with intention. And if we talk about intention, there are probably some metrics or indicators that I would imagine you use to assess the effectiveness of this workplace wellness initiative. What does that typically look like for you? How do you come in there and say, we're going to look at this and this will be a good benchmark to assess? I know it's probably a little tricky sometimes, but just, high level, what does that look like?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's all the standard things, and everybody will be able to look for those things. I'll give you a
Yeah.
couple that I look for that are a little bit different. One of them is vacation data. I want
Mm,
to understand what your vacation data is, because
yeah.
if your team isn't taking their vacation, there's a reason. They're either
Mm,
feeling like, we've all been there. It's too busy to take a vacation, too much
yeah.
work up, and too much work on the way back, that it's not worth taking the week off.
Yeah.
Or maybe you don't have the transition supports for your team, so that when you're gone, the
Yeah.
work stops. You just don't feel like someone else can handle it.
Yeah.
So if your team's not taking the vacation, then that's a significant challenge within your
Mm,
organization, right? So you need to be able to find a way to be able to take the vacation in order to do that.
yeah.
Another piece that really is a defining character for an organizational health is taking a look at volunteerism. And
Mm,
it sounds like, okay, we're going to take a break from work to volunteer together, and it's
hmm.
actually going to move you forward. But follow
Hmm.
me on this. We've got a third of our workforce is currently burnt out. We've got 500,000 people in Canada and 50,000 people a week in the US missing work
Wow.
to
Wow.
mental health concerns. Like,
Mm,
it's ridiculous how many people are actually missing work, right? And so when you're volunteering, imagine a scenario where once a quarter you take a half day, you stop the work and you go
mm,
volunteer as a staff together. Or even you do just a collection of finances. But now, Michael, we're going to choose you this time. And for this quarter, it's your volunteer opportunity. What
mm.
are you passionate about? What do you care about? We're all getting behind it this time.
Yeah.
And so now for you, you're feeling like your heart's warmed because people are investing in something that you care about, and you're watching them give their time and their resources to support it. But also now I see Michael in a different light. I get to see
Mm,
what you care about, what you're passionate
mm,
about, what you're invested in, so that when Michael makes a mistake in the future, hey, guess what? I know Michael's a good guy. He just slipped up, as
mm.
opposed to a negative thing. There's
Yeah.
research to show that when you volunteer as a team together, it leads to 82% better retention.
Wow.
Now, think about the productivity you got, right? As soon as you got a great vision, you can have all the strategy, you can have all
Mm.
the metrics, you can have all the goals you want. But if your team isn't there to carry them out, none of it happens. You spend your time hiring and recruiting and onboarding and training. So you need
Yeah.
to find ways to keep the team and keep them engaged. That's
Yeah.
one way to.
Hmm. It's really interesting, and I think we've all been through these scenarios. I remember once, I'll tell you a brief story. One time years ago, I was building a business. I was so excited to build this business. This was in the Midwest. And as I was building this business, I had to work a job. I had to pay bills, right? And I was good at that job, but I communicated this passion I had for building this other business. And I was always doing it in my free time, right? But as it was communicated, somebody used it as a vehicle to basically prevent me from growing within the company and instead take my position. That happens a lot. So I think instead of promoting passion and growth from within, there's this stigma where people feel like they either have to compete and squash and not really understand what you're interested in. And I think you're right. Where your passions align, there is more potential for profit and growth. But there's also a human element here. We lose sight of that a lot, from small companies, VC backed startups, to very large enterprise grade organizations. We lose sight of the individual. We're all people, right? But we're really focused on the bottom line. And the bottom line in today's day and age has changed and shifted quite a bit. It is no longer what it used to be 50 years ago, 100 years ago. It is changing at such a fast rate of acceleration. So fascinating. So I think those are really, really good points. You know, I guess this is another question for you. When we talk about the role of leadership, how can leaders foster a culture that really prioritizes employee well being? It puts it at the top tier of focus in an effort to be well by design as a company.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. There's a classic image of a guy at the gym, and
Yeah.
he's ripped and he's huge and he's bulky, but then it's like the guy forgot leg day, right? He's got the skinny
Ah,
legs,
yep.
right? You all seen that image,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so this I liken to organizations a lot. So
Mm,
often we're so focused on our productivity, our revenue, our
yeah.
strategic plans, and operational plans, meeting the quotas that we need to meet.
Yep.
That those are all great, but beneath that is the foundation of it, the team
Yeah.
that's going to carry you there. And if your team isn't
Yeah.
taken care of and isn't able to move you forward, none
Yep.
of the strategy is going to be supported. So the
Yeah.
foundation of your team is so critical. How you do that is a lot of times, it's you're trying your best to do things, but you're not sure if it's actually working. The
Mm,
first thing to do, ask.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Ask. A
Yeah.
lot of times, you try to do all these activities, you try to do all these events and things, but your
Yeah.
staff will tell you what they really need, especially if it's with intention around trying to
Yeah.
help support them in those kinds of things. I
Yeah.
do organizational wellness plans all the time where I work with companies and do surveys, but then you also get in and you do the focus group discussions. And
Mm.
so many times when you give them a voice, you find out what really will pave the way to
Hmm.
moving forward. So you got to do that as a start. But then the other
Yeah.
piece is don't ask if you're not going to do it. Right? You
Mm.
ask the survey, you do all the things, and then you don't do anything from it, it immediately kills it.
Mm.
It almost sets you back further in that way.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that is a challenge often, and Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about this
Mm.
really well.
Yeah.
This idea of the
It's
plateau
great.
of latent potential, right, and this invisible results. So sometimes when you start doing things, you try and it doesn't seem like it's working. And we had
Mm.
to do a workshop, and our staff still burnt out. Right? And you're like, yeah, of course, right? Like it was a workshop. What did you expect? He's not a miracle worker, kind of, but like
Mhm.
And so, what are you going to do and keep doing because you
Mm.
know it's right? Even if you don't see the results at
Yeah.
first, you have to trust that process and build intention. And when you
Yeah.
do that, your staff will see, okay, this isn't just a like, okay, check the box. No, we're actually moving forward with this over time, and we're building a strategy around wellness. It's not just about doing
Yeah.
things. It's about what's the strategy, what's our intention, and how are we measuring it? And that's
Right.
where it's really key. Like the employee engagement results do that, but there's other ways that you can check data to make sure, like, are we moving forward? Are we accomplishing our goals? And are we reporting on that, just like we do with our
Mm.
strategic plans?
It's so fascinating because all of this really points back to it's not a quick fix. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes time. Greatness takes time. Keep saying it. Greatness takes time, but the but here is that the caveat is we have to employ strategy. We have to take immense action. We have to understand and be understood. We have to drive opportunities for growth, and we have to open up and cultivate new channels. And I think the disconnect again in today's modern day workplace, and I see it a lot. Oftentimes I'll put my feelers out there just to see what it's like because I run companies myself, just like you, and we work within other companies, and you see what it's like. When you're working with a big brand, as an example, let's say you're an agency, which we have an agency side business where we're doing digital work, marketing, branding, strategy work right on the side. That's another business. We work with enterprise companies, and you'll have 10 people, 15 people in a room meeting for a meeting for a meeting for a meeting. They are so burnt out. They are exhausted. You could just tell. You look at their face, they're like, they want to combust.
Yeah.
They're heading up these departments. They're just drained. You don't see that same response when working with a founder or a small team of a well-funded startup or even a mid-market brand as much, because I think they've been able to jive a little bit better with growth in sight. But there's a lot of pressure at big companies. And I think with that comes a lot of uncertainty. And I where this tracks back to what Well by Design does, I believe, is that if they're able to really foster the right strategies and employ them the right way, with meaning and intent, over time, they're going to be able to see great advantages. And more importantly, it's the right thing to do. It's the right way to operate. It's
There
the
it is.
best way to
Yeah,
operate.
right. It's beyond anything else. It's just the right
Yeah.
thing to do, right?
Right
You
thing
hit
to
it on
do.
the
Yeah.
head. We all want to be treated as a human being, and work's
Yeah.
important. Don't get me wrong, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not coming in and saying your team's going to be skipping through fields of flowers by the time we're done. And,
Yeah.
like, that's not what it's about. Work's hard,
Yeah.
complex, and challenging,
Yeah.
but, it's the right thing to do. Take care of
Yeah.
your people.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned, bigger companies where there's the burnout
Mm.
and all those kinds of things, but I would ask you, as a founder of companies
Mm.
and doing the things that you do, uh, I would suggest that there's probably different pressures on you and
Yeah.
different things that lead to the burnout.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you're comparing like the machine of big companies versus the pressure that you would face, like
Mm.
what's that like for you, and how does that lead to burnout? Because it's probably similar for so many
Yeah.
other people, right?
I think the advantage of being a larger enterprise company is that you often have a level of certainty in an uncertain market. You're in what I call a hold position, where your goal is to hold. It's a win if you have a 0.015 incremental growth move in a quarter. It's a
Yeah,
win because you're
yeah,
holding. As a small company, you have complete uncertainty and chaos, and your goal is to ride the wave like a great surfer in the vast ocean, with unpredictable tidal waves coming your way due to what we believe is climate change happening, and things are shifting and changing in real time, right? So I think that the elephant in the room here is that with a smaller company, even a mid-sized company, there's just so much more uncertainty. And bigger companies, when they make changes, they're very calculated, very strategic to hold. Smaller companies, mid-sized companies, they often have to move very quickly in a very agile format, and it doesn't always create certainty. There's always this, gosh, will we be around in 6 months? Do we have enough runway? Can we survive the blast? Who knows? And that's why you have to be, I think, relentless in your ability to think creatively, to think in ways that challenge the norm. And again, it goes back to doing the right thing and the best thing and the most unique thing that can act as a catalyst for your growth and market. So anytime I've ever found success with myself, and I just hold true to this idea, it really supports this concept of becoming radical, changing the game, challenging the market, coming up with something that I would want to use, that others would really want to use, that they want to be a part of, right? That, one time I created a business in the luxury arts market because most art galleries operate a certain way. And this is just a good use case. But if you go to an art gallery, typically what I found after a tremendous amount of research and time, which is a whole nother conversation, uh, is that it's run by people who are retired business
yep.
owners, retired employees, and they're just doing it because they want to make a little money and they want something to do as a hobby, or they operate in trade where they have direct alliances with collectors and museums and auction houses. But the problem there is that they operate in a retail environment. They're not in a commercial space. They're retail. You come in, you look at art, they're not getting business from that channel, right? That's very minimal. It's maybe 5% of their total business at best, right? So my goal in that period of time was to challenge the market, make high value art more accessible for all. And we created a business around that. It was in the Midwest, also in California. But I think, to go back to your point, there are a lot of struggles that you have as an early founder, as a small company, as a mid-sized brand. And those struggles are usually very different from a more established entity. And with those challenges, the same issues still apply with your team. You need great team members to support you. And I think more importantly, you mentioned this idea of, can I take a vacation because I'm not sure if I can actually pass the baton to so and so to take over when I'm gone. That's a very real issue for any company of any size,
Well,
especially
think
as
about
you're really small.
Yeah, think about all the entrepreneurs out there that are doing everything in their business and trying to be
Exactly.
everything in their business. And you mentioned the
Yes.
fragility of your business.
Mm,
Unsure. A lot of times it's like, is this a new plateau, or is this just like a blip in the radar? Is my business
yes.
actively growing, or is it not? And how you don't
Yeah.
know whether that next thing is going to be the next thing. When I started my company, the idea was on organizational wellness assessments and getting in and helping to fix workplace cultures and have that idea, much like we're talking about, doing the surveys and the
Yeah.
focus groups, building out strategy and all that stuff. I didn't have a client for the first 6 months. I
Mm.
realized really quickly that I had to pivot. And this is something
Yeah.
so critical for entrepreneurs
Yeah.
because people don't want to trust you to come into their organizations and identify their vulnerabilities
Mm.
until they trust you. And
Yeah.
so it was critical for me to find ways to build trust. I
Yep.
started doing workshops and speaking, and I actually found a huge passion in speaking. And
Mm.
so one speaking gig begets another and that kind of a thing. And next thing you
Mhm.
know, keynote speaking is a significant part of my business.
Mm.
Workshops with clients is a significant part of my business because
Interesting.
that's when you get to do deep work and you get to come in and understand how to develop the leadership culture and identify specifically with companies.
Yeah.
Being able to make that shift allowed me to grow to the point where then I build the trust and now I can do those organizational wellness assessments and get to do the
Amazing.
work, right? But for an entrepreneur who's looking at, yeah, the fragility of your company, how do you
Mm.
pivot to make sure you're ready to go?
It's so hard. You need purpose in a pivot. You really do. You need to, I think so many people are so focused on the quick win. And it's hard. I think it's really hard as an entrepreneur, as a business, as a team, to not be locked in on a quick win because there are goals that have to be met as a business. You need revenue, you need sales, you need growth to operate. You need it. You need cash flow, you need runway, you need those things. It's very important. It's like life support. But if you can start coming up with mechanisms to address that while being focused on intention and purposeful pivots, we've done the same within another business where when COVID first began in early stages of the pandemic, a lot of our core business suffered. It hurt because people were looking for customers and sales and revenue. So you had to pivot the business from a secondary offering to a new primary offering in a very different way. And then that, instead of keeping you here or going down, you actually went up. So I think it's really important to identify that sometimes when something isn't working or it's not working fast enough, we just have to be kind to ourselves and say, let's come up with a mechanism to purposefully pivot and get ourselves on track. And that kind of brings me back to another question around personal wellness practices, right? Do you have any personal wellness practices that you think have positively impacted your life that you then bring over into everything that you do?
Yeah, 100%. The first thing I'll say to any client I speak to is I don't think it's meant to be arduous and all consuming. There are so many voices around wellness and all the things
Yeah.
that we're supposed to be doing that if you actually try to do all the things, you'll burn out just trying to be well. And so I think it's really
Yeah.
important that you acknowledge that, as you say, you don't have to be everything to everyone. You don't have to do it all in
Yep.
one time. But we need to listen to our bodies and understand that there's little things that we can do in advance. And I'll say this too, a lot of times people don't factor rest in
Mm.
renewal to their week because they're so busy and they feel guilty. And no, we're
Yeah.
designed for rest. We're designed to enjoy ourselves. And so, yes, we need to work. Yes, we need to do all the things, but we also need to make sure that we're ready to go for tomorrow. So, what do?
Yep.
I absolutely love going to the off leash with my dog, taking a walk in nature, having some time watching her run around in the trees with the other dogs,
Hmm.
chance for me to innovate, be outside, that kind of thing. Love it. Right. I also really
Yeah.
like tennis. Tennis for me is,
Mm.
it's a strategy game. If I'm
Yeah.
really frustrated and had a tense day, I can crush a few serves and who
Yep.
cares if it goes in? It's just, I'm having a great time. But it's
Yeah.
outside, I'm active, I'm with a friend, I'm talking.
Yep.
That for me is just such renewal.
Yep.
And I think it's really, like, as I said, it's really critical. One of the best quotes that is an old Chinese proverb is
Mm.
don't wait until you're thirsty to dig your well. If you
Mm.
wait until you're burnt out to try and deal with it, it is
Yeah.
so much harder than if you just start to do the things now that help to renew you along the way.
It's such a good quote. We lose sight of that so much. And I think it really comes down to the principles of the name of your company, Well by Design. I think it's by design. When we create a life to be lived and a career by design with intention, that's where we see results, resonance. We get renewed. I think when passion can meet purpose and purpose can create profit, then we can thrive, right? As a
There you go.
business.
I need you to sell my business for me. There you go.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
said
I
it
mean, that's
perfectly,
that's what
right?
it is. I mean, but and
Yeah,
that should be the philosophy and the ethos of every person, but it's hard because we lose sight of, if you're a young entrepreneur, I've been there, you have bills to pay. Early on, it's
yeah,
easy. You're like,
yeah,
you're 20, you're 18, it's okay. If you're fortunate enough to not have too many bills and you have some supports, which hopefully you do, then it's not so bad. But it gets harder as you have kids, if you have health complications, if you have other commitments in life, it gets challenging. It gets really hard. So hard. Sometimes people don't even know how hard. And everybody's experiences are so different.
yeah,
And now in the new age we live in the modern world, with the stresses of the workplace, with the stresses of health and upcoming, who knows what's around the corner, you never know, right? So it's everyone is dealing with something else. I think what's difficult is we don't often live by design, we don't often live with intent. And I think if we track back to that, if we really say to ourselves, what do we want to be doing, what can we be doing, and what should we be doing to help us to overcome all those things that create burnout. Because if you can design it with that intent, like you said, you can play tennis, you can get out with your dog, you can have the right team infrastructure within a business, within a corporation, you can be respected and supported, you could be nurtured and looked at as a vehicle for positive change. Because if there is ever that hiccup, as you said, if you ever drop the ball at work, it happens. Everybody drops the ball. We all do. Let's cut ourselves some slack. And I think that really speaks to a future first mentality, thinking to future trends, knowing what I said, what emerging trends do you think are going to be seen in the realm of workplace wellness? What do you see around the corner that might become more of a norm, might be more adopted, or even more well received?
yeah. You know what? Okay, I want to pause that question and go
Yeah,
back to what you said a
please.
little bit. There's a really,
Yeah.
I'm going to leave you with my challenge, the status quo. But
Yeah.
I want to go back to the idea that we all get busy and we all do these kinds of things. But I
Yeah.
think that nobody thinks it's going to happen to them until it
Mm,
does. And
yep.
so nobody thinks they're going to get burnt out. Everybody thinks they can push through.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it happens. We're all the same in that way. We have a bandwidth,
Yeah.
we have a capacity,
Yep.
and life's complexities will come at you. There's
Yep.
no avoiding it. Just when you think you got it sorted out, something else happens. It always does.
Yep.
That's what led to my burnout scenario. Crazy story. In the height of COVID, I had a young family, 3 and 5 year old, and my wife and I decided to take our kids out skating. My wife fell and broke both of her wrists
Mm,
in that. Like, imagine what you do without one of your wrists
that's
or
horrible.
hands at any time. So for a
Mm,
couple of weeks, I'm like, don't worry, I got this. So I'm trying to work and take care of the kids and take care of my
mm,
wife and do all the things. And I ignored the pain in my stomach that I thought was an ulcer. It wasn't an ulcer.
mm,
It was appendicitis. My
mm.
appendix had ruptured, was beyond
Oh,
septic. I ended up in the hospital trying to recover
oh,
from all that for
wow.
6 days as a result of all this. So we were doing fine. We were taking our kids out skating. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, boom, life's complexities hit.
Wow.
And now we're
Wow.
struggling, trying to navigate that space. It was
Yeah.
wild, right? But we had built up a network of support in advance so that for 30 days after we got home, we had friends show up at our door for dinner and bring us
Wow.
dinner every night for 30
Wow.
days, like a wine, maybe a coloring book for the
Yeah.
kids.
Incredible.
By having that experience, we were prepared for the
Yeah.
inevitable complexities. I think we try to just push, push, push so often that when that complexity comes, we're caught off guard and like we just don't have any space for it.
Yeah.
We need to allow room for that complexity to come in.
That's amazing. And to see you come out of that, and so many of us have those things. All of us do. And
Yeah.
and kudos to you for getting through that and being there for your wife, having those great friends. And I guess I have a question for you, just talking about support. If I'm somebody who's a builder and a creator, or I'm working in a company and I'm just working and doing my thing and trying to be the best I can at what I do, and life happens and I don't have those supports. Let's say I don't have them, but life does happen. What do you encourage people to do to make sure they're prepared for that, because it will happen? What's a good life hack for that? How do you get those supports? Where are those channels to get them in, to bring them into the mix?
Yeah, I mean, it's different if you're looking for the standard supports. I hope we're all connected. If we're
Yeah.
not, connect now, connect in advance. And it's
Yeah.
as simple as having friends that you can go for coffee with and
Yep.
people that you can trust in those ways. You can meet them in all the different places. We all know about
Yeah.
all those things. I think there's simple things that you can do, like keep your freezer always full with leftovers. If life hits, you got
Mm.
food,
Oh,
right? It's
absolutely.
simple, but it's like that's an easy one, but it helps. And the
Yeah.
other comes from nurses, triage. It's so
Mm.
important to be able to triage. So when you hit that point where complexity hits and oh my god, I got too much on my plate, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Start with red. Start with the things that are going to fall apart if
Mm.
they don't. That's my kids. I got to feed them. I got to take care of them.
Yep.
It's the things that it's like I have to do this. I don't have to do the yellow yet, but
Yep.
those are things that are important where if I don't deal with it soon, then it's going to be a problem. And then there's the green. So often we spend our time in the green because it's easy and it's quick and I can knock off a few things off the to-do list. And yet
Yeah.
those are the things that don't need to happen right now. Sure, they need to be dealt with eventually, but they're not red and they're not yellow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to shrink your and triage your workload and your impact in those times. And that means saying no. Sometimes saying no
Mm.
is like the best thing you can do to give
Yep.
yourself space, right? And
Yeah.
then sometimes too, you don't know who you can lean on until you ask. People are
Mm.
so willing to help. People in your workspace,
Yeah.
people in your community, your neighbors, your church, whatever it be, your
Yeah.
community,
Yeah.
however it be to connect. Um, if you ask.
Yeah, so important to ask and not be afraid to present what you're up against. If people don't know, they can't help. And I think that's step one. And some of us, many of us feel like we can do it on our own. We should do it on our own, especially in the US. It's a very
Yeah.
individualized, we have to build, we have to do. And it's so interesting because I work with people all around the globe, but I'm in the US, right? But this often this US mentality is this independent mindset. And it's very
Yeah.
difficult to break through. I think when you can actually establish a community of people who care and create those supports, and you do say, hey, I need help, it takes a village. You need to come together. And sometimes you really need that support. And oftentimes you really do need that support. So it goes back to, again, trends that you see in the workplace. Like, what do
Yeah.
you think
Yeah.
is going to happen, knowing that there are these breaks, there are these barriers, that people are so burnt out that they're struggling? What do you think is going to happen here in the next year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Where are we going, you think, Stephen?
I mean, I think it's really hard to know where we're going in the next 3 to 5 years. What I can
Yeah.
say is you can plan now for tomorrow. And
Yeah.
so every organization has the standard tailored responses
Yeah.
for how they support their team, whether it be a benefits plan or a family assistance plan,
Yeah.
vacation days, those kind of things. That's standard, right? But what is it that makes you unique in your
Mm.
space, makes somebody want to work for you? So my
Yeah.
wife's an interior designer, and so
Mm.
I often use like a framing analogy for this.
Mm.
Every home has a bathroom and a kitchen and stuff. There's the
Yeah.
standard things within a home. But when you walk into each person's home, it's so different.
Yeah.
It's unique to them, it's tailored to them, and it's comfortable and speaks to them. So what is it about your company that
Mm.
sets you apart so that when you're hiring people, you can say, this is why you want to work for us, because we care for you in this way. We will take care of you and lift you up in this way. Our
Mm.
goal is to move you forward in this way. Again, you're in the trenches. Do you got their back no matter what? Right. And at the end of the day, it is a workspace. So you need to make sure you've got your priorities focused forward for
Yeah.
the growth. But do you have their back along the way? And that's
Yeah.
what I think, no matter what, no matter where we go with technology and all those pieces, where our societies and our cultures are all going to go. We've got remote work, we've got hybrid work, we've
Yeah.
got in-office work, all the things. But if you're caring for your team and you're taking care of them along the way, they'll be there for you.
Yeah. So important. I mean, the biggest takeaway is be there for your team, be there for your company, be there for your colleagues, your friends, people that you care about. Do the right thing, and it will come back full circle. I agree with you 100%. And if you're early on in this journey, you're just getting started trying to think about how to improve workplace wellness, where's the best place to first start, you think?
Come to my website.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You know what?
Good.
Yeah, come check out my content. No, you know what? I think honestly, there is a wealth of content and a wealth of stuff out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
One thing I like to think though is there's so much standard content. and try
Mm.
to find something that resonates with you and speaks to you and does differently. So I
Yeah.
am a contributor regularly to a wellness education magazine. It's an international digital magazine and it's
Cool.
free. And so I do monthly articles on there that are
Mm.
just like basic things for how you can support in the workplace. But my intention is that I always come at it from a different point of view that you maybe haven't considered before. Right.
Yeah.
So take a read on that.
Cool.
All the information's on my LinkedIn page, something like that to connect. But in terms
Amazing.
of how do you find things for yourself for wellness, we all know what gets us back to baseline. It's the things that we love to do. And
Yep.
unfortunately, they're usually the first thing that you cancel when you get busy. Stop canceling
Yeah. Yeah.
things.
Totally. Put it on that radar, get to it. Yeah. And I guess as a remote first workplace now with so many, right? With the introduction of COVID, the pandemic, the surge, the magnification and the expansion of that, and now the change in the way we work, even more than it used to ever be. How do you think that's influenced wellness strategies within organizations?
Huge,
Yeah.
huge. I have a specific virtual keynote for organizations
Mm,
on designing a healthy remote or hybrid workplace culture. And it's
cool.
specifically because at the end of the day, you still need to have that camaraderie and that culture, and you will.
Yes.
You'll have unwritten rules, you'll have the way that you work, all of those pieces.
Yep.
So, how do you intentionally design a remote workspace to
Hmm.
build that culture and let your team know that you care when you can't just stop by and have a conversation? As easily as if they're in the office. I think
Yeah.
it's critical, 100% critical to be able to focus on, and it's different. If you had a strong culture in person, it's so different once you get virtual, and you need to
Yeah.
redesign, refocus on it.
Absolutely. There's huge differences between the two. If I think about engaging employees, as you just said, do you think there are more effective ways to engage employees in these wellness programs to ensure they're actively participating and they want to be a part of it?
Again, I say ask, right?
Yeah. Ask.
Ask what they
Yes.
want and ask what they need to be a part of.
Yeah.
It's great to say, let's go to an escape room, but if your team just actually
Mm,
wants to connect and have a chance to talk, going to an escape room isn't going to do it. Doing a retreat with
yeah.
your team might be exactly what you need, but it might be the most stressful thing. So, again, I think it's ask. One thing I know
Yeah.
is that as a leader, it's really
Mm,
easy, remote or in person, to go and say, okay, I'm going to go check in on my team. And you go and you say, hey, how are things? How's this? And you're actually investing. But then you immediately switch to like, okay, next. And you go into the tasks, right?
mm,
So then your staff get used to the idea that when you come in to check on them, you're actually going to come to a task.
yeah.
Once you don't, just go in and check on them and say, like, awesome, I hope you have a great day. Walk away. Because
Yeah.
then they know that you actually just came to check on them,
Mm.
right? And sometimes just saying a quick check-in point is enough to keep your staff connected.
It's really interesting. I think you hit it. It's connection. We have to connect with people and we have to connect without motive. Just be you, be real. Just be your authentic self. And it's hard sometimes, especially as the company gets bigger, as the organization gets larger. I've worked with big companies and for big companies before. It can be a very different way of operating because sometimes you're just a cog in a wheel. And I think as we can introduce this idea of really looking at this being well by design, even for a large company, the opportunities to then grow and not just hold position in market, but truly grow, truly care, truly show up. You'll expand your horizons for possibilities, not just with your team and the people, but as a company, as a business, as a brand. So now this has really been really, really impactful. And I think that's been the goal is, to talk about
Yeah.
the impact you're making in the space and the leave behinds. And I guess to wrap that idea up, where can people find you in Well by Design? Where can they locate you and how can they work with you?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed this dialogue too. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Check me out at Stephen Langer. I'm also on the web. Wellbydesign.ca has a list of all the services and things that I offer. I love keynote speaking at conferences, as well as diving in and working directly with teams,
Yep.
sometimes with a leadership team, or else doing workshops, those types of things. But then I also love diving in, doing deeper work with organizations. Happy to work virtual, happy to come in person. Had the opportunity all over North America as well as in Iceland. So travel's
Mm.
not an issue for me. Let's do it. Let's have some fun along the way. Let's find some real strategies to move your team forward. So yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Amazing. This has been fun and very impactful. And I'm excited that we got to share your story and what you guys are building at Well by Design. I think you're on to something. You're definitely becoming radical. You're changing and challenging the market every day. And you're finding ways for people to become more organizationally well in their strategies and their performances. So it's been great, Stephen. Excited to have you back. We'll be cheering you on every step of the way. We'll be watching and following you. And hopefully we can sync back again in the near future and keep sharing your story and your journey.
Absolutely. Anytime. Yeah. Thanks again.
Amazing. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Becoming Radical. If today's episode sparked something in you, follow wherever you listen, join the conversation, and share it with someone ready to think beyond limits. Be unlimited, be bold, and become radical. See you next time.
Game over.